Welcome in on another instant reaction episode in the MovieBuffs podcast. My name is Tyler, and I'm going to be going through Oppenheimer. Now, at the time of this recording, we haven't been able to do our full episodes. That is because of the actors' strike. If you are a fan of this podcast, you know that Ron is a growing actor. He has a movie that he's in coming out in September that I'm going to figure something out. That we're going to do something big for it. I don't know if this whole strike will be resolved by then, but I do want to make sure that we show how proud we are of Ronald and his accomplishments. But since he cannot do the full episodes, I'm doing more instant reactions. I might actually come back and do a breakdown of this. If you know me, if you know this podcast, you know that I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan. I consider myself a Nolanite. I get excited for his movies, and this was one of the most anticipated movies for myself going into this year. I was excited when it was announced, and I'm going to get into my feelings more in just a little bit, but the visuals, his storytelling, and his willingness to be different, but not different to be cute, I'll say. We see a lot, I believe, in some movies, directors that are up and coming or that are talked about, and they sometimes just try to be too cute with movies. Just shots that just don't make sense. They're trying to be Soderbergh with his shot setup and the way that he directs movies, and they're not them. They do too much instead of just telling the story. And so with Christopher Nolan, I think it was ever since, it was maybe when it had to be either Batman Begins or it had to be The Prestige, where it really caught on for me, that I started to look into more about his movies and how he directs it, all that kind of stuff. And so I've always taken inspiration. I remember when I saw one of the first trailers for Oppenheimer, I was like, wow, how can I do that with my day-to-day job, with my editing, with my filming for my company, Time to Train Fitness? How can I incorporate something? Like, how can I use B-roll in that manner as an art form? And so I find it very inspirational. Before we get into more of this breakdown, and if you are unfamiliar with these instant reaction episodes, they are more of spoiler-free. I'm only going to talk about stuff that is already out there, whether it's a meme, a tweet, a story that's already out there. I don't really think that there's too many things that I could actually, if I just talked about the movie, that would spoil it. Seeing it is a whole nother experience. But I'm going to talk about the drama, talk about the story, and then a few pieces of the movie that I found pretty interesting. Now, coming into this, and I don't know how you could avoid any of this type of marketing, but the drama that was building with Mission Impossible, but also Barbie. Let me talk first about the Mission Impossible drama. I mentioned this in the other instant reaction episode that I did for that movie, how Tom Cruise, he got a little mad about how he can only have IMAX theaters for a week for Mission Impossible because Oppenheimer was coming out and they had reserved all the IMAX theaters for, I think it was 3 weeks. And so there was this big stir being caused, and to me, it's bad planning. I just don't understand how it's just not bad planning on Mission Impossible. That, okay, why don't you just release it another day? Find something else. But that's just my opinion on that. With the Barbie drama, I've actually more thought it's been some media, and this is just my personal opinion, but I feel like some media try to push negative when it's not negative. And I think that they do that because they think that it causes more of a story. They're going to get more attention, and they don't think that positive is going to get them the type of publicity they want. And I've seen a lot of, I can't say that. I've seen a few posts that it's Barbie versus Oppenheimer, or even some people saying, well, Oppenheimer's only doing good because Barbie's marketing. It's like, are you kidding me? Do you not know who Christopher Nolan is and how many fans he has and why he's an acclaimed director? Do you not realize who he is and like what he's done? And I think that no matter how hard people try to make it a versus, I think that a lot of people, fans, I think the overwhelming majority have seen this as, let's support both. Let's go out and see both, because it's a great thing that, okay, you go to the theater, and I went opening weekend to Oppenheimer, and it was packed. I couldn't believe that people were sitting in the front row for Oppenheimer, but I was just like, Christopher Nolan does that. So I've seen actors, directors, and posts on Twitter about how, this director is seeing this one. I was going across the street to see, I think it was Tarantino that did that. But it's a great achievement for movies just to see people going back, enjoying them, and a reason to celebrate it. And it's not a versus, it's a and I think that it's great that they promoted both movies. Actors from both of them were promoting both of them, and that positive can be still out there. At the time of this recording now, this movie has actually surpassed 200 million worldwide. I quickly looked this up before I hit the record button, and this release came out three hours ago. So over 200 million worldwide. And I remember seeing some tweets about projections for this and what it would be for opening weekend, and how it's projected to make X amount. And I think it was being like projected to make 70 million, I think, in the US market. And people would respond, Oppenheimer's going to be a flop, huge flop incoming. Again, negativity trying to creep its way in. And there are people in the know, I'll say, people that are not ignorant, that are in the know with this movie. Like, well, it's rated R. It's a war political movie. And that right there alone will, if they don't know who Christopher Nolan is, or if they're not enticed to go, they're not going to go. So the fact that it has blown away all the projections, it's great. It's a good sign for the movie, for the future of cinema as well.
Feeling inspired by hosts Ron and Tyler? This episode of the MovieBuffs podcast is brought to you by the YouTube workout channel Time to Train Fitness. With all things YouTube, it's free. Jump into a bar class, crank out a cycling workout, or pump out a strength session. Everything you need to work out for free at home. Check out the description and subscribe today.
You heard the promo about Time to Train Fitness, and you're thinking, how do I get some dumbbells? There's really only two products that I recommend when it comes to at-home fitness, and one of those are the Core Home Fitness Adjustable Dumbbells. If you're already following the YouTube workouts, these are the dumbbells that I use, me, Tyler, and you've probably seen me adjust them between the weights super fast. Along with adjusting quickly, they go from 5 pounds to 50 pounds and feel great in the hands. Head to the link in the description and grab yourself a pair. You have the free workouts on YouTube and will now have the dumbbells to help you reach your fitness goals. Now, the storyline for Oppenheimer, it's the story of the American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb. Took that right off of IMDb right there. Now, this is a good segue here to talking about the glorifying of the atomic bomb. I remember when this was first announced and what the movie would be, tons of people, again, trying to pile on that negative train. Oh, I hope they don't try to glorify Oppenheimer. I hope they don't try to glorify the atomic bomb and Hollywoodize it. And I still saw some tweets and people trying to really push the negative, but it really showed, in my opinion, that they didn't see the movie. They don't understand what the movie's about. And they're making a fuss for attention, they're pushing it in the wrong direction. And I've seen some good responses to it too, that, okay, you're upset about this, but well, that doesn't have to do with the movie. And maybe that might be better put in a different type of movie, whether it's a documentary of some sort. But with people that don't support this movie, they think it's a negative movie. It's about evil. I don't personally understand that. And I said this going into this, and I did research before. I watched some stuff, who is Oppenheimer, that kind of stuff. And at no point did I think that, watching the movie or before the movie, did I think Oppenheimer was a good person. And there's a story I want to tell now about this. And after I told my wife this, when we were driving home, I remember I said that at no point did I think he's a good person in terms of the way that he carried himself, the way that he treated people, all these types of things. And that never changed throughout the movie. And one of the things that a movie that I've seen in the past I have seen how they have Hollywoodized movies was that movie Molly's Game. And if you're unfamiliar with it, this woman did these, I don't want to call them underground poker games with celebrities and billionaires and whatnot, but she literally broke the law, and there's no way around it. She broke the law, was doing stuff illegally, and at the end of this movie, Molly's Game, the theater that we're in, these people were clapping for her when she didn't get as big. I can't off the top of my head remember what the outcome was it, but people were clapping for her, like she won and that she was a good person. It's like, are you kidding me? This person still did illegal stuff. Like, what are you clapping about? And that is how Hollywood can Hollywoodize, quote unquote, movies and stories to make people feel good when these aren't good people. So with this movie, Oppenheimer, never thought that he was a good person, never thought that his actions, I could never condone anything like how he treated women, the way that he approached things. And some people, oh, well, you're now putting a button here. No, I'm going to say that if you were tasked with the same job, now we live in a very different world. We live in a very different time. And if you were tasked with the same job now, and this is where you got to put your thinking cap on and you have to try to put your mental state in this. Are you saying that you wouldn't be able to do that? Assuming you had the knowledge, the power, the authority to do what he did, and you were given that opportunity, are you saying that you wouldn't? Are you saying you wouldn't help your government? Are you saying that you wouldn't be that person to develop it, put the team together, all that kind of manage it? Are you saying that you couldn't do something like that? And I don't know if there is an answer to this. I think it's the listeners, people listening to this, how they can interpret that and how they can answer that. But that's the way that I looked at it in terms of, yes, this atomic bomb is very scary. It's very serious. And if you're tasked with the same job, are you able to do it, to put yourself in those shoes? And so those emotions, those types of feelings that you get, I think they're all present throughout the movie, that you think about those things. And those are elements that I like about movies that are directed by Christopher Nolan. Let's now talk about the cast and crew here. And if you don't know, director Christopher Nolan, I'm a big fan. And the cast here, talking with the lead actor, the individual who played Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy, it was something that I'll say, well, I don't want to say it was a rare pick, but this was his first lead acting movie. He's been in other smaller things. He's been other movies with Christopher Nolan, and I'm gonna get to a story in just a second about Batman stuff, but because we're seeing a lot of tweets about how he almost got the role for Batman, or he tried out for it. But with this role, Cillian wanted to achieve his physique. If you watch the movie, the trailer, you see it's a very slender man. And so he lost weight and he kept a strict diet during filming. And something that I read that was just insane, that during the filming, Murphy restricted his caloric intake to a single almond per day. Single almond per day. I don't know how you could do that. Insane. And I don't know how long it took to film this movie, but one almond per day was how he kept so slender for this movie. Yeah, the other cast in this movie, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Alden Ehrenreich. I know I mispronounced his last name right there. I felt like I was practicing it before and I blew it. But moving on, Josh Hartnett. And now this is one where I'm going to segue to some Batman stuff. So something interesting that I read in doing research for this episode was how this was kind of like a full circle moment for Josh Hartnett. And if you're not a fan of Josh Hartnett, or you're like, who is that? You're like, if you saw who I'm talking about, like, oh, where has he been all this time? Now, he was one of the 3 finalists for Batman when they were rebooting, when they're doing Batman Begins, and he declined the role. And I guess it's come out, and I feel like I've seen the interview where he says that he regretted the decision, and he's always been an admirer of Christopher Nolan, and he's always wanted to work with him. Now, coming back, doing this, his role was pretty prominent in this, and he did a great job with his role. And it was great to see him on the screen, but also Cillian was up for the role, or he auditioned for the role of Batman. And you've probably seen, if you've gone on Twitter in the last week, you've probably seen tweets with video footage of him in the outfit. And one of the interesting things that I watched Christopher Nolan say was how Cillian, he had the presence for Bruce Wayne. And that was one of the things that Christopher Nolan wanted. Like, the actor being casted had to be able to play both characters. And we're hearing this a lot right now with Superman coming out, being able to play Clarke Kent, Superman. But going back to Batman Begins, there's been Batmans in the past that maybe the Bruce Wayne aspect isn't fully there. Maybe they just look great in the suit. And I know that I actually agree with this, how some people have said how Val Kilmer was a great Bruce Wayne. He had that vibe, that billionaire vibe about him when he wasn't in the costume, that he had that ability to command that. And I think it was Christopher Nolan talking about how Cillian had that you could believe that he was a billionaire when he was wearing the suit, the Bruce Wayne suit. And it didn't work out with him being casted as Batman, but he was also I'm trying to think. Yeah, he was in all three of the Batmans with Christopher Nolan as Scarecrow. And so the whole full circle thing here with Cillian, Josh Hartnett, very cool moments to see both of them from a trilogy of movies that I thoroughly enjoyed in this. Now, Jason Clarke was also in this. Dane DeHaan, Rami Malek, Casey Affleck, Gary Oldman. That was actually one that I was like, who is that actor playing the president, playing Truman? And when I went home and I was on IMDb, I was like, oh my goodness, that was Gary Oldman. And then I can't believe I blanked on it when I was watching it. But also Florence Pugh's in this. And I just read some of the cast there. And I listed some of them. But this is honestly one of the most stacked casts that I've ever seen. Every scene, there's either a cameo or an appearance, and you're just like, you're literally just like pointing, like, look who it is, look at it. You're like, oh, that's this person. Oh, this is them. And you're just like, oh my, how did all these people get in this movie? And some actors, they maybe didn't have as much screen time, and they didn't have maybe some lines. I was actually trying to think of this. If Jack Quaid, if he actually had a line in this movie, I feel like I've seen him in the trailers before, and in the movie, I'm trying to, I can't say off the top of my head if he actually says anything, but it's honestly one of those movies that you're just blown away with the cast of this, and the acting is just spot on. They crushed it, and I feel like it's one of those things where I think the topic, but also the belief in the movie. And I'd heard, and again, just watching stuff after, just trying to learn more about the movie and actors talking about, and I heard multiple actors talk about this, that being on a set with Christopher Nolan is, I think some of them said it's a very serious tone, but it's a heightened sense of they're all locked in for a common goal, and that the environment, but also the ability to be creative, all these types of things, they're all there, that he hits on so many different things, whether it's the environment, whether it's the script, the story, or how he's directing. He checks so many boxes that actors elevate their own performances for a movie with Christopher Nolan. And I think that everybody in this movie, there was no point at any time where you're like, man, that was a bad performer, or wow, they mailed that in. It was just great acting throughout the movie. Talking about now scenes based on real life. This was one of the more interesting things that I'd heard some of these before. So seeing them in the movie, and then now I feel like they're in a lot of different breakdowns of the movie. There's the whole poison apple that Oppenheimer had done in real life. He had given one of his professors a an apple that was, I don't know if it was laced or if it was infused with cyanide. And in the movie, they have Bohr, it's Kenneth Branagh's character. He's talking with Oppenheimer's professor at the time in college, and he has the apple in his hand, and Oppenheimer comes and grabs it and throws it away. But in real life, I guess that the university actually found out about the apple, and Oppenheimer's family had to influence the university to make sure that he stays. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, a slight tweak to it, but I'm guessing it was a way to get Kenneth Branagh's character into the scene and to lead this introduction into the movie. And I'm going to talk about the opening sequence a little later, but he basically tells Oppenheimer, guides him in his direction, that I think, or gives him advice. And this is in the movie. I don't know if this happened in real life, but gives him information, gives him guidance that helps him choose a more appropriate career path for him. Another I don't want to say interesting, but another part of the movie that was based on real life was how he had an affair with a married woman who he impregnated. And then later on, he married her. That's Emily Blunt's character. Those things actually happened. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning, at no point did I think that he was a good person. And these things are talked about in the movie. And, his affairs that he had, and the times that he cheated on his wives, all things that I cannot condone, and that I cannot say that I would say that this person's a good person. Well, that now takes us to one of the more interesting parts that I think that I know that I've been wanting to listen more to, actually the score for this movie. And if you're a fan of Ludwig Göransson, I don't know how you can't. I mean, he crushes his scores for movies. And I really think it's his integration and it is mixed with the synth and classical components. And I remember I saw this interview with him. I don't know if it was after and now it's coming back to me more. It was, I think, the behind the scenes after season 1 of Mandalorian. And so it was a part of the little documentary that's on Disney Plus. And he's basically in his studio and he has these humongous boards of synths that allows him to alter sounds, and just watching him play on it, it was like, it's one of those things where you're like, how do you know how this changes the sound of the pitch, the tone? How do you know all that stuff? And the way that it integrates with the movie. I mean, they're just connected. His score elicits emotion when you're watching it, whether it's anticipation or sadness or whatever is trying to be conveyed on the screen. I was just blown away with it. At points, I was just thinking, wow, this really sounds like they are together. It's beautifully connected. One of the interesting things that I found, and a little trivia point here, the score for the film doesn't feature any drums, as director Christopher Nolan and composer Ludwig Göransson felt using a sound typically associated with the military would be inauthentic to musically capture the character of J. Robert Oppenheimer. So interesting little trivia fact there. Now the opening sequence, and now I said I'd come back to it and talk about it. I actually turned to my wife in this after the opening sequence, and I said, wow, that's one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen. And what a way to open a movie. And how I open this talking about how his willingness to be different. This opening sequence, it's essentially a sped up version of the childhood, the growth of Oppenheimer when he was in college, and in movies. I mean, pick any movie off the top of your head where they do a little backstory, where they give the story, how someone grew up, and they go shot by shot, and sometimes it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and you're like, man, that was so boring. The opening sequence of this movie, it's a beautiful combination of shots, B-roll, sound, and just enough dialogue to tell you the childhood of Oppenheimer and his time in university, that you get a sense of the character, you get a sense of what's to come, all the foreshadowing. You get all those things in an opening sequence. And I thought it was just a beautiful display on the screen. Now, segueing here too, after I just said beautiful display on the screen, we're talking about the nudity and sex scenes in this movie. This was something that I actually didn't know before. I'll admit it on this podcast. It was Ron, my podcasting co-host, that I think he sent me some reel, a joke or something, or I can't even tell you what it was, but he was talking about that there's nudity in this. And again, I didn't know that there was nude scenes in this. So one interesting thing or quote that I pulled for this was how Cillian Murphy says their relationship, he's talking about him and Florence Pugh's character, is one of the most crucial emotional parts. Listen, no one likes doing them. They're the most awkward possible part of our job, but sometimes you have to get on with it. Now, there's, I think, 2 nude scenes in this movie. And I always think it's funny when people have a tweet or joke about how, oh, imagine watching the scene with your parents. I personally, I don't have that type of feeling when I watch those types of things or see those types of things with my parents, but I can see that some people might have that type of reaction. Now, a couple more items here that I found interesting. There was no use of CGI in this movie. They did do they did recreate the Trinity test where they tested elements. They tested a version of the atomic bomb that there was no use of CGI in that. It was a combination of gasoline, propane, black powder, aluminum powder, and magnesium flares to recreate it. Now, it's a very intense scene build up when this happens. So to know that there's no CGI on it, it's amazing. And it's one of those things that it goes to how this director and this team really want to have the audience experience something that is different. There's nothing against directors that use CGI. I know that Christopher Nolan has used CGI. There's nothing wrong with it. The movies that I like use it, but the fact that there is none in it, it's pretty amazing. Now, another thing that I found pretty fascinating about this movie and a little behind the scenes thing was how Nolan films on film. Did I just say films on film? He uses film instead of digital when he directs a movie. And the reason being that it's the closest thing to what the eye can see. And that is one of the elements that I have said that why I like the how it looks, how everything feels on the screen. It's part of your senses, what kind of emotion is elicited. So this movie, it was all filmed. I think it was all filmed on IMAX, and I could be wrong with that, but I did read that Kodak developed its first ever black and white film stock for IMAX for this, and the entire reel of IMAX for this is 11 miles long and weighs 600 pounds. Humongous. Ton. A lot of weight there. So getting now and wrapping this up with the recommendation for it, I think that you should see it if you're a fan of film. If you aren't interested in it or you're on the fence about it, if you're a fan of cinema or if you're a fan of storytelling, see it. And one of the pieces that I saved for the end here, and I'm surprised I didn't say it earlier, was how this movie was the first Christopher Nolan movie that I wasn't as excited to say maybe Inception or one of the Batmans or even Interstellar, that the topic of it was something like, that's not something, a genre that I'm too stoked about, that I was like, okay, of course I'm excited and of course I'm going to see this. It's Christopher Nolan, but the topic of it, it's not my typical wheelhouse, but I will say that this is the most complete Christopher Nolan film, in my opinion, that an average audience can go see it and understand it and enjoy it. And I know that there's other movies out there that he's done that fans don't feel the same about that, whether it's Tenet, Inception, that's just too much or it's too confusing. And so this one, it's the most complete movie. And I think that it should clean up at the Oscars. But that's my opinion on that. and again, see it if you're a fan of cinema. That's been it for this instant reaction episode. I'd love to know what you think about the movie. If you've seen it or if you plan to see it, let me know. I know I threw a lot of stuff in this, and you probably wouldn't be surprised, seeing that I am a Nolanite and that I enjoy this director. Now go see it. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.